Hey, do you want to learn how to use Unreal Engine to recreate the animated logo from the beginning of the Disney Plus Star Wars series like The Mandalorian and more? This is the way. Hey, Aharon Rabinowitz here for School of Motion. If you follow me online, you probably know that I love Star Wars, maybe as much as creating animation and visual effects, and if I can bring it all together, even better. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use Unreal Engine to recreate the animated logo seen at the beginning of The Mandalorian and other Star Wars series on Disney Plus. We're almost exclusively going to use Unreal Engine. We're going to import 3D models, we're going to create new materials for them, and then we're going to animate everything, and then we're going to export. And finally, we're going to bring it together in Adobe After Effects, although it could really be any video editor of your choice, because we're going to do so much of the heavy lifting in Unreal that it's just going to be some simple editing of the clips together. So with that said, join me, and together we can rule the galaxy with motion graphics. Oh yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe below, and also to download the project files so you can practice your Mad Jedi skills along with me. With that, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do, unless you've got some serious modeling chops, is to download some free 3D models that we can use in this. If you go to sketchfab.com, there is a ton of free Star Wars 3D models. Some of them are really awesome. I'm going to grab this one from Torwing, which is the Mandalorian helmet. And what you want to do is you want to download the FBX. And then I'm also going to go and grab this Darth Vader helmet. And this is from Sean Hu, and I'm going to download this. In this case, I'm going to choose the OBJ because OBJ and FBX are the two formats that you can easily import into Unreal. And just so you can see, these models both have CC attribution attached to it, which means that we've got the right to use this and share it. So for example, I can include it in the project files, but we do have to credit the artist. So please make sure to do that if you use this in any of your work. With that done, let's move on to the next step. Next, we're going to boot up Unreal. And then once we're in there, we're going to choose to create a new level. I'm going to go with Film, Video, Live Events. I'll choose blank. I'm going to make sure to turn on ray tracing, and I'm going to call this project Mando. You can call it whatever you want. Then I'm going to hit create and it'll start up. Once it's started up, then we can go into the content folder in our project, and I'll create a new folder. I'll right click and choose new folder, and I'll call this 3D models, and I'll hit enter, and then we'll just jump inside of that. And then we're going to open up our downloads folder, and we're going to grab these files that we downloaded, the Mandalorian helmet and the Vader helmet, and we're going to just drop them right in. And we're going to see that we have like an FBX import, and that's for the FBX file. And so there's a couple of things I just want to jump in here. You may or may not need to touch this stuff, and that's going to be up to you. So let's just take a quick look. Quickly going to reset to default so we can look at the different things. And you can see I've got this thing here, combined meshes. Now, you may not want to use this. I happen to know that in this, I want to create whatever model I'm bringing in. It might have several pieces, and I plan to make it all one material. So I don't want to be dealing with lots of different objects for one 3D model. So I'm just going to hit combine meshes. And then I'm also going to come down to the materials section right here. And for search location, I'm going to tell it, don't search. I'm going to tell it, do not create materials. And also don't import the textures in case there are textures along with it. You might not need to do any of this. I'm just doing this so I get the basic, simplest object. I'm going to hit import, and then we've got a dialog for the OBJ that we're bringing in, which is the Vader helmet. And for this, I'm just going to scroll down a lot lower here, and I'm going to choose again, combine static meshes. And I don't know if there are any material settings here that I need to work with. So I'm just going to tell it to not import the materials, I guess. And that should do the job. Let's click on import, and it looks good. Now at this point, we want to hit save all so that we save these models in there, and we'll get a dialog for that, and we're going to save them. You can see that Vader's helmet is kind of off. It's laying on its back, and we'll have to deal with whatever problems come with that one when we get to Vader. But let's start with the Mandalorian helmet. So let's create a new level. I'll choose empty level, and I'll hit create. And now we can get to work. So let me grab hold of the Mandalorian helmet. I'm going to drop it right in here. And I can see its axis is not at the center point. And if you want to change that, and we're probably going to need to do that with the Vader helmet because something's off there, we're going to need the modeling tools. So let me just quickly show you how to do that. We're going to go over to Edit, Plugins. And on this plugin dialog, I'm going to type in modeling. So first I'm going to turn on this modeling tool right here, and we get a warning that this editor mode is a beta version. Don't worry about it. We'll click yes, and then we'll do the same for this one right here. And again, we'll click yes, and then we will hit restart. It'll ask us if we want to save selected, and we do. I'm going to call this level Mando, and we'll click save. And when it reboots, this is still open. We can close this, and then let's go to our content folder and let's access the Mando level right here, double clicking, opening up, and Mando helmet's right there. We can't see it because there's no light. So for the moment, I'm going to switch over to the wireframe mode so that we can see things a little bit better. And then let's go up to the modeling tools over here and choose modeling. And I'm just going to look for the one that's for the axis, and we'll find this under transform, and we'll have the pivot right here. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to tell it to be at the center, and then I'm just going to hit accept. So now the pivot point, if I hit W or E or R to rotate, let's say we go with that E to rotate, we can see that we're rotating around the center, rotate it 90 degrees. Let's also make sure to put it right at the center of our universe, right here, and I just reset on the location. Okay, so now we're set up to start working on this and have the lights move around the helmet, but we also have to create materials and different things. So what I'm going to do is this. For the moment, I'm just going to add in a light, and this is just a temporary thing. So I'm going to get out of modeling mode, selection, and I'm going to add in a light that we are not going to keep, but we're just going to use it right here. I'll just click on this right here, and I'll go over to lights, and I'll choose a point light, and I'm just going to move it over, and let's go from wireframe into lit, and we can see the Mandalorian helmet here. And for now, I can just make this a lot brighter just so that we can see what we're doing. Okay. The next thing I want to do is create materials. We're going to use a couple of different kinds of materials. One's going to be a shiny reflective material for the helmet, and the other one's going to be a neon light. And in fact, I want to create the neon light first. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm going to go to shapes, and I'll create a cylinder right there. And I'll just move this over to here, and I'm going to hit R to scale it. I'm going to make it very small. And then we're going to make it very tall. And this is going to be that lightsaber-like light that passes in front of the Mandalorian helmet. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into our content folder, make sure we're there. We're going to create a new folder. We'll call this one Materials. And then once we're in there, we're going to go into that folder, and we're going to create a new material. Right-click and choose Material. And then we're going to call this one Glowy Stuff. I like technical names like that. Then we're going to double click and open it up. And this will bring us into the material graph, which is where you work with nodes and connecting them and creating materials. If you've never used something like this, it can be a little scary, but if you've used something like Redshift in Cinema 4D or other 3D programs, you may be very familiar with this. In any case, I'm going to walk you through setting things up here, and it's going to be easy, and we're going to blow right through it. So let's take a look. So we've got these different pins, and each of them have a different characteristic of the material. In this case, I want to just right-click on emissive color, and I'm going to choose promote to parameter, and it's going to let me choose a color and create it as a parameter. So in this particular case, I'm going to double-click on this, and I'm going to choose blue, bring up the brightness there, and that will be our emissive color. And we can then control the brightness of it by adding in a multiplier. So I'm just going to click and drag right on top of this line, and I'm going to choose multiply, type it in, and then from here choose multiply. And then I'm going to right-click on the B right here and choose promote to parameter. I'm going to rename this to emissive strength and hit enter, and suddenly it becomes dark again because the emissive strength by default is set to 0. Let's set this up to 5. You can see that's pretty bright. If I set it to 2, it's more blue. If I set it to 10, it's almost white, or at least it appears that way. But I'm going to set this to 5, leave it at that for the moment. And so here I think we're looking pretty good on this material. I'm going to hit save, and you can see it updates the material right here. Let me minimize this. And then what I'm going to do is, because we're going to want a blue one and a red one, I'm going to create a bunch of material instances. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to choose create material instance. We'll call this one blue. And if we double click on blue and open it, you can see something that's a lot simpler and a lot easier to parse than something that might be a very heavily noded material. We've really just got two parameters here. The emissive strength, which we can control. We can set that up to 10. We can set it to 0. I'm just going to set it back to its default. And then we've got the emissive color, and we can change this to something like red or whatever else we want to do. I'm going to cancel on that, and we're going to keep it as it is. hit save for the material, and then bring that back down. And I'm going to take this blue and I'm going to drag it right on top of our cylinder. And now we've got a glowing blue lightsaber type thing. And you can see it's reflecting on the material that's on the Mandalorian. But since it's not a reflective material, we're just getting lit, but we're not getting the actual very reflective look. So the next thing we do is going to be to create the metal material. And to do that, let's right click again and choose material. And we'll call this metal. And we're going to just jump into it again. And this time we're going to choose for the base color, we're going to right click and choose promote to parameter. And we're going to set this one to white. And click OK. And then we're going to set the metallic up really high. We're going to right click and choose promote to parameter. And we'll set this metallic up to 1, which is fully metallic. And the reason it's not super reflective right now is because the roughness is probably set to like 0.5 by default. So again, I'm going to right click on this to promote it to a parameter. And now it's set to 0, you can see. And that is a bit too reflective. We're going to have to play with that once we get the lightsaber light sort of set up next to the helmet. But let's set this to, I don't know, 0.2. Let's try maybe 0.15 even. And so we get a very reflective material with just a spreading of the light over it, which is going to be really helpful in making that cylinder, that glowing cylinder, spread the light a little bit better. So let's save this. And then just because I like to work with material instances, we'll right click and we'll choose create material instances. And the reason I like material instances is because when you make changes to the instances, they instantly update here in the window. Whereas if you're working with a master material, those need to be saved each time you make a change. So I'm just coming into the metal instance. I'm going to drop it on the Mandalorian helmet. And okay, so this is looking okay, but I can tell you right now, here, let me delete this light because we don't need it anymore. I can tell you right now that we're not going to get great reflections from this no matter what, because we're just working with Lumen, and I think the best solution for this is to go from the standard lit view, is to go over to path tracing, which it takes a little bit longer to render, but it looks so much better and so much more real. And so let me kind of zoom in a little bit here. And we can see this reflection here. And if I wanted to, say, spread that out a little more, let me bring up this material instance right here. And you can see that if I were to play with the roughness a little bit, make it more rough, well, it spreads out, but it also loses some of that sheen. So we have to find somewhere between, maybe we can set it to 0.2. And I think that's pretty good. And we're going to also do some additional lighting that's going to help show more of the contours of the helmet. So for now, this is looking pretty good. And again, I might course correct and go back to 0.15 if I like that better. But let's kind of finish up with setting this up and see where we can get to without doing that. Okay, so I'm going to save this material. In fact, I'm going to hit save all at this point, and I'm going to save my level. I'm going to save the helmet, everything. Save that. We're going to minimize this, and I want to get this set up properly. I'm going to set this to a position of the center of the universe, and then I'm going to move this out to the right. Let me pull back a little bit. Bring this out. And I'm going to have it rotate around there. And to do that, I'm going to need to have sort of a pivot point that's at the center. And rather than using the modeling tools that we used before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new actor. Double click on this, or actually you can just click here and choose basic actor. And that one, make sure that it's set to the center of the universe there. And I'm going to rename this actor to pivot, just so that I can easily find it. And I'm going to make the cylinder a child of the pivot. Now, it's not going to work at first, because what I need to do is, if I'm going to make it movable the way I'm going to, I have to set it from being a static mesh over here to movable. And once I do that, I can take the cylinder and drop it inside the pivot. And now if I were to say rotate the pivot, we can rotate around. So we're going to get to that all in a little bit. Let's just do a couple more things here. So next I want to work on my contoured lighting. That's just going to give us a little more of the shape of the helmet. So we're going to grab an HDRI, well, not really an HDRI. We're going to grab a spherical image from Polyhaven. It's a free website with lots of cool assets. I'm going to click on HDRIs right here. And then I'm going to look for studios. And I like this one right here, Studio Small 8. And you can see it's small studio type lighting. A lot of good stuff here. I'm going to click on this. And instead of grabbing the HDR, because it's going to be easier for me to work with in the materials the way I'm going to be handling this, I'm going to click over here and I'm going to grab the tone mapped JPEG, and I'm just going to download that. And just click on it, and then you can right click and choose save image as, and then just save it to where you need to. Now back in Unreal, I'm just going to take this Studio Small 8 that I downloaded. I'm just going to drag it right in and the texture appears right here. And okay, let's create one more material that we're going to work with here. We're going to choose create material and we're going to call this background master. And we're going to jump into that. We're going to take this Studio Small right here. We're going to drag it over there and we're going to just take this RGB and drag it right over to the emissive color. And then we're going to do what we did before, which is to add in a multiplier. And let's choose multiply, add that in. And we can create a parameter here just to be safe because I'm not sure how bright it needs to be. So let's, again, promote a parameter. We'll call that emissive strength. And let's set that for now to 1. And then let's go work with that. And then I'm going to create a material instance. And one of the advantages of doing that is that when I jump into the material instance, one of the things I can do is I can set the material to be two-sided, which I needed to do because we're going to be inside of the sphere. So now that I've turned that on, the inside of the sphere, if we kind of move in, we can see it there. If two-sided is off, we won't see it. So I want to be inside this sphere and I'm going to use that almost like I would use an HDRI, but just a little differently. And there's certain advantages to using it this way. Okay, minimize that. And then let's create a sphere that takes over the entire size of this whole thing that's all the way out there. So let's go to shapes and we're going to go to sphere and we're going to scale that up. In fact, I'm just going to do this manually by typing in, why don't we say 50, and let's apply this to the sphere right here by the material. And if we look around, we can see the studio. Now that is a lot of reflective stuff that I don't necessarily want to have visible on here. So this is where adding in those settings that we did for the emissive strength is going to be helpful. I really just want something like 0.1. That's even too much. I want to go with 0.01 and we'll see if that works for us. And don't worry about being able to sort of see it in the background or that we can see this right here. We're going to take care of that in just a little bit. But let me save what I've got here and I'm just going to hit save all and it'll ask me to save all this stuff. I'll choose save selected and we'll move on. And now let's add in a camera, which will help us frame everything and start to see things the way we should. So let me go over to here, click on this and choose cinematic and go to Cinecamera Actor. And that's going to be in the center and right inside the helmet. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to choose snap object to view. And that brings the camera to where we are seeing things here. And if I switch from my perspective over to the camera actor, I will see the helmet. And, you know, it's a little hard to tell here, but this is using a wider angle than I want the camera to be using. So I'm going to make a couple of changes to the camera. The first is I'm going to select the camera and I'm going to come over here and instead of universal zoom, I'm going to switch it to an 85mm prime, which is more appropriate for close-ups, but you can see that it's blurry now. So the next thing I want to do is just come over to the focus settings and I want to change it from manual over here to disable. And now everything stays in focus. Now in a normal project where you're trying to make things look realistic, you would want some depth of field. But what we're doing here, we don't want that for. So this is great. I'm gonna move back and you know, I can see that my camera is not perfectly straightly aligned with this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the camera and I'm going to change its rotations here. Make sure that this is 0 and this is 180. And then I'm going to move the camera in 3D space a little bit this way. I'm going to set this right here, the Y to 0. And this is our depth away. Set the camera, the height of it a little more. And we can see, yeah, that's looking okay. And I'm actually going to want to get a little closer for the animation. But for now, I'm actually going to pull just a little further back so we can look at our lightsaber thingy. And I'm going to bring it down a little bit so it's just closer. So for now we can see things. And okay, so here's the thing. As we animate this and we have this lightsaber sort of pass around it, maybe behind it, what's going to happen is we're going to see this light passing behind it. We're going to actually see it. And I don't want to be able to see that. So take a look. If I grab the pivot, hit E to rotate it. So we can see it behind there. And I really don't want to see it. I just want to see it reflected. So here's what we're going to do. Undo that. And I'm going to select this cylinder. And with my cylinder selected, we're going to come over here into the properties for it, and we're going to type in visible. And what we'll see is there's a property here called visible. And if I turn it off, well, it becomes invisible, which is not that helpful because we want to see the reflection. So we have to also make another change here. We go Effect, and we're going to look at Affect Indirect Lighting while hidden, right? This is important. If we turn this on, now we can see the glowing object reflected in it, but we don't see the glowing object. I actually want to do that same thing with the background. So again, I'm going to turn on Affect Indirect Light while hidden, and then I'm also going to go to Visible, and I'm going to turn off Visible. So now we've got just the helmet. That's all we're seeing. And we're seeing this blue light reflected in it. And we're not seeing the lightsaber, and we're not seeing the background. So now when we animate our pivot here for the lightsaber, we're not seeing it behind it. And you get this really cool look without having to see that glowing stick in front of it. And something else I'm going to do is probably just make that cylinder a little bit bigger. So I'll hit R to scale it up. Just make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to just pull in a little tighter and just get close like this even. And I think that we are good to go for animating it. And by the way, if we wanted to bring up that background a little more in terms of the lighting, if we go into the material and we just make this even a little brighter just for the moment to see it, so we can really see the reflections of light on this. And I think we're definitely going to keep it lower for the final. The other point is that why did I want to make a sphere instead of using like an HDRI setup like the way you normally traditionally would, is that with the sphere selected, I actually have easy access to the transformations. It's a lot harder with an HDRI setup in here. So if I were to rotate this, we get a nice change of the lighting in here as it rotates, which is something that we need for this animation. So it's really helpful to have that as well. But I think I'm going to bring that brightness back down to, let's say 0.02. And for now, leave it at that. And let's get to animating. Hey, are you enjoying this tutorial and you want to do a deep dive into Unreal Engine? Then I suggest you take School of Motion's course, Unreal Engine for 3D Artists. I took the class myself and it helped me transition from other 3D programs right into Unreal Engine. Check it out along with other courses in 2D animation, 3D animation, graphic design, and more at schoolofmotion.com. All right, let's get back to it. Okay, so to animate things, we need to add in a timeline. So let's come up over to here and click on this and choose Add Level Sequence. And we're just going to save this. We'll call this Mando Sequence. I'll click Save. And then once I'm there, I'm going to take my camera and drop it in so that we have a camera view here. I'm going to set this to 24 frames per second because that's the rate I want to work at. And then what I have to do is I have to animate that blue light coming from behind and then moving in front. And I'm also going to animate separately the environment moving. So here's what we'll do. I'm going to grab hold of this pivot right here, and I'm going to drop this in. And I'm going to add a track. I'll just click on this, and I'm going to add a transform track, which you can't see in the capture, but that's one of the options is transform. And from here, if we scroll down transform, we can see that we've got location, rotation scale. I'm going to go down to rotation, and the one I want to work with is yaw. Right now it's set to 10 degrees. I'm going to set that to 0. And I'm actually going to set that up to 90. So that's really right behind the helmet. And then over time, I'm going to animate this. So let's add a keyframe right here. And I think we really only need to go to like, let's give it just 2 seconds of animation. And it's probably going to be even a little too long. But let's animate this, come to the end here. And let's set the second rotation keyframe to -270. Which brings it around the other way. So if we move it back in time now, we can see that the lightsaber is passing right there in front of it, and it comes back to behind the mask. So the thing is, though, is that it's working with curved keyframes, with Bezier keyframes, and I don't want that. I want them to be linear. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all of our keyframes right here, just both of these, and we're going to right-click. And again, you can't see this in the capture, but one of the options is called linear. It's a triangle shape. And when we select that and we use it, now you can see we've got this triangle here, and these move linear. So they don't speed up over time. They actually move at a constant rate. Right? So that looks pretty good. And again, playing back the animation is going to be weird because we're using path tracing. If I were to switch this over to lit, we're really not going to see something that looks great, but we can definitely play it in real time. It's just not looking nearly as good. So let's come back to path tracing, And then what we're going to do is also just animate the environment. So let's bring it back to the first frame, and I'm going to select the sphere, and I'm going to drop that right into here. And the sphere's not at the bottom, and it's got to transform. So we're going to roll that down, and we're going to choose rotation. And again, we're going to set a keyframe right here at the beginning for yaw, although this is set to right now to 0. I kind of want to, I want this more like here, so we can see these kinds of cool lines that are there, and then move further down to the end, and I want them to again pass in front that way, and we don't want it to move even close to the same speed. We want it to be fairly slow. We just kind of want extra contouring with a little bit of environmental light moving. And so now if we play, right, so we can see the environment moving, and of course we're running into the same problem, which is that they're speeding up over time, starting slow and speeding up. So again, let's just select these keyframes, and we'll choose from the options, we're going to choose linear, it's the triangles, and now if we play this back, we've got some nice animation there that's really cool. That we've got both this lightsaber moving and these other lights contouring. And the only other thing that I want to do here is have this fade in over time, the glowing lightsaber. So to do that, we're going to grab hold of our cylinder. We're going to drop it in here. And this is where things get interesting. So instead of a transform track, I want to get into its materials. So I'm going to click on track, and I'm going to choose static mesh component 0. And once I've done that, over here by static mesh component 0, I'm going to click on track again, and then I'm going to navigate over to element 0, which is our material space. And with material element 0, I'm going to click one more time for parameter, and the two parameters that we created, the emissive color and the emissive strength, are now available to us. So I'm going to set the emissive strength right here. I'm going to add it, and twirling all this down, emissive strength right now is set to 5. I want to set this at the beginning, let's set it to 0, and set a keyframe. And then over time, why don't we say like 12 frames, why don't we add in the emissive strength at, let's go with 2 for now and see how that looks. If I go to 5, I think that what's going to happen is the transition will be so short that it'll, it's going to not give it enough time to fade in. So if I go to set this to 2, which is almost as bright, maybe not bright enough, but you can see it fades out. So the alternative is to get it a little further in time, move this down here just a little bit, and then set this to something like 3. And I feel like that's as bright as I really want that to be, and we get some time to fade out so that as it's coming around the back, it kind of just appears over time. And really, truth is, I want the lights, these gray lights, these contours, to start even before we even see any of the glow. So maybe even a few frames of this over here. So we give ourselves like, I don't know, 4 or 5 frames. And so we've got first this light's going to be there. Then we start seeing the blue light. And then we're going to want to replicate this going backwards. So I'm going to make another one for the strength, the emissive strength right here. And then just a little further down in time. And we're going to set the emissive strength down to 0. And so maybe just move this up a little bit here. So we get like here, it kind of goes from nothing to bright, where it hangs out over here for a moment, and then it starts to get darker and fade off right here. And I'm thinking I want to make the first and last frame, I want to make these linear so that they don't ramp into it. I want it to just slowly edge out of the brightness and then just go straight on at a normal speed. So right click, and I'm going to choose linear. And I think that what happens is, yeah, we get something I think was really working here. So now in the same vein, let's just quickly animate the brightness of the environment so that we can also fade up the contours. So let me move down to the first frame, or actually let's go like not too far in, maybe at that frame 10. Let's go over to the sphere here and just drop it in. And down here, we're going to click on the plus for the track, and we're going to choose static mesh component 0 like we did before. And then within the static mesh component, we're going to click on track, and we're going to grab element 0. And all that means, element 0, like I said before, is a material zone. You can see that the object has one material, and that's element 0, and we're going to be animating something in that. And if we come down here to material element 0 and we click on parameter, you'll see that the only parameter that's available to us is the emissive strength, because that's the only parameter we added in. So if we click on this, and now we've got this keyframe at a value of, here, twirl it down, of 0.02, come back to the first frame, and let's set that to 0, and then let's kind of repeat that sort of step right here near the end. Let's say, give it right there. Let's add a keyframe in for 0.02 and then move down to the end. And we'll set that to a value of 0. And we might want to just move this maybe just a few frames more. Let me get in a little tighter. Move this a few frames more, maybe 12 right there, like that. And then also, like we did before, let's just set the first and last of these keyframes. Let's just right click and choose linear. So now I think that what we've got here is pretty good. A nice fade. That looks really good. And I think we're ready to use all of this and just kind of repurpose it to animate the Darth Vader light up. And don't forget to save everything, of course. So hit the save button there. I would go to save all and just make sure that everything is saved. Okay, so rather than recreate this entirely from scratch to build up the same kind of project, what we're going to do is go into our content folder right here, and let's grab the Mando level right here. Just drag it and choose copy here. I'm going to rename this level to Vader. And then I'm going to jump inside of Vader right here. And what we'll see is that we've got the Mandalorian's helmet. I'm going to go to wireframe for now. Then let's grab hold of the Vader helmet and drop it in, and we're not going to see it, not because it's too big or anything like that, it's just because it's really off-centered from its pivot point. And we can see that there. So I'm going to undo, just reset that. And we're going to go into the modeling tools right here, back where we were before. And with the Vader helmet selected, we're just going to go over here and grab that pivot tool again. We're going to choose center, and we're going to choose accept. And then we're going to get out of the modeling tools, go back to selection, and we're going to reset the position so that it's now centered with the Mandalorian helmet, and just get that 90 degrees like that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, and I'm going to make it bigger. But although I think it's going to be a little easier if we switch over to our cinema camera view so we get the alignment properly. And I'm going to scale this up a little bit. And I want to just align the eyes just a bit here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now we have Vader in there, and I know we're going to need to give it materials and all that, so let's just get rid of the Mando helmet and switch back over to the path tracer. And we're not going to see anything right now because we're on the first frame of our animation where there's no light. So what I need to do is to work with the animation sequence, but instead of using the one that's already in here, which isn't going to help us, right? If we make changes to that, if we bring it in and we reassign everything and then we make changes, we lose the Mandalorian sequence that we need. So what I'm going to do is come over to the content browser over here at the top level, and I'm just going to grab the Mando sequence, drag and drop, and I'm going to choose copy here, and we're going to call this Vader sequence, and then we're going to drag this right into the project here. I'm going to delete the Mandalorian sequence right there, and then I'm going to select this Vader sequence right here, right click and choose Edit Vader Sequence. And when we get in here, what we're going to see is that all of these little pieces, the camera, the cylinder, the pivot point, none of these are connecting to the right objects because they're looking for the objects that are in the previous project or the previous level of the Mandalorian. So we have to tell it now to use the elements that are here in our scene. So I'm just going to right click on the sphere right here. And from the pop-up, I'm going to choose Assign Actor, and I'm going to find the one called Sphere, and that replaces that. I'll grab the pivot right here, and I'll choose Assign Actor, and I'm going to grab the pivot. I'm going to go to the cylinder, do the same thing. We'll grab the cylinder, come up here. We have to do the camera as well. So assign actor, and we'll choose the cinema camera actor. And then finally over here, this area is red. This is the view. This is like what the camera is recording. Right click here, and at the bottom you can see there's cinema camera actor right there. And now if we hit play, well, we're seeing something, but you know, Vader needs his materials. So we'll come back over to the content browser. Let's go to materials. Let's drag the silver material right onto Vader. And yeah, now we're doing better. So if we check this out, we've got this blue lightsaber going across Vader. Now, something else I noticed is for some reason the camera's messed up here. So I'm just going to select my camera, and I'm just going to make sure that this is at negative 180 where it's supposed to be. And that definitely gets me better, but I think these all need to be 0 and 0. And it looks like this should be at 0 as well. And then, okay, we're back to where we need to be. But if you find that you're accidentally moving your camera when you don't want to, like in this case, this camera should be locked in, you can right click on the object, the camera, and you can choose transform and then lock actor movement. So now the camera won't move anymore, which is exactly what we want here. So the last thing to do here is to change the animation and also the color of the lightsaber. So before we change the color, let's just change the animation. That's going to be super easy. I'm going to come into my sequencer right here, and I'm going to run down to where we have these animation keyframes. And this stuff is okay. The emissive strength, that's still going to be the same. It's the pivot point, the transformation on that I want to change. So I'm just going to move this one over here, this one over here to the beginning, this keyframe over here to the end. So now the light is moving in the opposite direction. And then for the sphere below, let's just do the same thing. Let's move these keyframes, this one over here, this one over here, and just get this at the beginning. And if we play back now, we've got the light going in the opposite direction. So far, so good. Now we want to make this light red. So to do that, let's come back into our content browser, and we can grab hold of the blue, and we can drag it and choose copy here. And this one, we're going to change to red. So red, and it's so intense that it's almost looking orange, but it will show up as red. We'll click OK, and we're just going to save this, and we're going to rename this to red. And then with our cylinder selected, we're going to drop this onto the cylinder. Now, here's the bad news. I know this looks like it's working, but it's not, because the second we move back in time, we can see that the red turns back to blue. And I've tried a lot of different things to try to make this work, but I found the only real way to do this is to actually start from scratch when it comes to the color animation. So we have to select the cylinder right here, and we can keep that in there, I believe, but we have to get rid of this material element right here, delete that. And with the cylinder selected over here, we're going to try again. We're going to apply this material. And if we come back to the sequencer and we add that element 0 back in, so let's come over here and choose element 0. And then we choose emissive strength. And I'm just going to, again, come back to where we had it before. And let's just check the value here, set that to 3. And then we come back over to frame 5 and we set that to 0. And we do the same at the end here. So, we get near the end and we just go right here. And then we set this one over here to 0. And now when we play it back, this should stick this time. Now, rendering comes with its own set of challenges, but I'm just going to walk you through how to render this particular project. So I'm going to go over to the sequencer. I'm going to click on this button right here to render the movie, and we get this dialog here. And if I click into here, we can see different settings that we've got. Right now, it's set to output JPEG sequences and deferred rendering, which is the standard render as opposed to the path tracer. So I'm going to turn these off. And I'm going to click on settings right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is choose to output as ProRes. You could choose whatever format you want. I'm just going to go with this for this project. It's just easier for me. And then I'm also going to add anti-aliasing, which is super important when you're using path tracing. So if I click on settings and I go anti-aliasing, you're going to want to set this up really high for good quality. Something like 512 samples is a good number I have found. But if you're planning to do something like motion blur, you actually need to keep this number lower and then use this as a multiplier because it's creating multiple samples over time. So I would tell you this, for this project, keep it at 512. If you were using motion blur, you might want to set this to 2 and set this to 256. You'll have to experiment and see what gets you the kind of motion blur you want while also giving you good quality samples. In any case, these two numbers are set. And I want to go to override anti-aliasing so that will just use these numbers. And this is good. We're good right here. And then the last thing we need to do is to output path tracing. So under settings here again, I'm going to head down over to path tracer. And that's what I'm going to use right here. And once that's done, I'm going to click accept. And rather than having to do this again, I'm going to go back in there just for a moment. And I'm just going to change it from unsaved configuration, save a preset, and it's going to ask me what I want to call it. And I'll just name this Mando render. And now when let me just accept this. Now, when I come back to the content browser, we'll come to this one right here, and we'll grab the Mando sequence right here and I drop it in, I can just choose Mando render. It's actually just using it by default, but it would be available to me right here. Now, a problem that I've experienced every once in a while dragging in a sequence is that even though I drag it in, for some reason it doesn't render properly. So if that happens, if you kind of run into that issue, you can open up your level and then, go into the sequence. So we can go into the sequence, edit Mando sequence, and we can just add it to the queue the way we've done it. That usually solves the problem. And again, we're using the Mando render sequence settings right here. And you can also choose where you want to save each of these files. There's a default location. I'm just going to leave it as it is. And then I'm just going to hit render local and let it work. And now the render is done. And as I open it up, let's open up Vader's sequence right here. And, I think this was looking really good. However, I feel like I could have played with the timing a little better so that the lightsaber light starts just even a little later. So we first get the contours on they've even been established before we see the red light. It's okay. I think we'll do fine. And from here, we're going to take this and bring it into After Effects or Premiere Pro or wherever you want to bring it in. We've done all of the real hard work here, and the rest of this is fairly simple. So let's just jump into After Effects and take a look. Okay, so here I am in After Effects. We're just going to drag these right in. I'm going to drag them over the composition symbol right here. We'll set it to a single composition and we'll just drop it in. And we're going to hit Control K to make changes to it. I'm going to make this 4 seconds instead of 2. So we've doubled it and move down over to here. And what I'm going to do is put Mando on the bottom and we have Vader up on top here. And let me see, about 106, I think, is where there's going to be a good transition point. What I'll do is I'm going to change the mode from normal, and I'm going to change that over to lighter color. And then I'm going to move this down over to here. And so we get like a nice transition. Just as one is going out, the other one is coming on. And I'd say that, again, I mentioned I wish I had given the contours just a little more time, but I think we're looking pretty good. I do feel like these highlights are a little strong, so I'm just going to, in post, take care of that, although if you can do it back in Unreal, that's great too. I'll choose Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and from there, I'm going to choose Effect, Color Correction, and Curves, and I'm just going to darken this up just a little and bring up the highlights. So the midtones and the shadows are darker and the highlights are still strong. And then just because, why not add a little bit of a glow? I might normally use Red Giant's optical glow, or I might use Plugin Everywhere's glow. But in this case, we've got a perfectly good glow in After Effects for this effect. So I'll choose Effect, Stylize, and Glow. And then I'm going to bring up the radius quite a bit. I'm going to raise the threshold so only the brightest areas are glowing. Let's see, before and after, just a little bit, and then from there, let's just take a look and see what that looks like. That's looking pretty good. And, I feel like you can also just have this whole animation happen even faster than we're doing it here. I left it at 2 seconds, but probably even 1.5 seconds is enough time to pull all of this off and feel like it's both cohesive and you can see what's happening. But beyond that, it might be too fast. So this is looking pretty good, though. And from here, you'll just go to Composition, add to Render Queue, or add to Adobe Media Encoder, and just choose your output settings and go for it. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope that you walk away from this tutorial with new knowledge and information and some really exciting ideas for yourself on how you can create cool stuff. And if you're really excited about Unreal, then check out School of Motion's course from Jonathan Winbush called Unreal Engine for 3D Artists, which I took, and not only has it allowed me to create motion graphics like this, which has been so much fun, but also I've started creating products for Unreal, 3D materials, and some visual effects stuff that you can find over at thepixellab.net. Anyway, once again, I'm Aharon Rabinowitz for School of Motion. I'll see you soon.